So for our next one, this is going to be continuation of ions. So we're still looking at um, writing ionic compounds. So the first thing we have to talk about is chemical formula. So chemical formula, we have different vocabulary terms. We have coefficients, numbers in front. We have symbols. We've seen these before. We have subscripts, which are the little numbers, and then we have parentheses. So these are going to tell us, this is like the recipe for the element. So when we read this, we're saying that we have 2Al. So the subscripts tell us how many of each we have before it, 4O. The number in front, the coefficients, tell us that we have 5 of the whole thing. So this whole thing, we have this 5 times. And the last bit is the parentheses. So the parentheses show us that there's 3 of what's inside the parentheses. So this gets a little bit complicated when we start reading these, but the main idea is to figure out how many of each we have so that we know how to count them up. Okay, so let's look at our example here. So for example, we have H2SO4. So there are 2 subscripts. The 2 goes for H. So H is our hydrogen, so there's going to be 2 hydrogen ions. M's. Sulfur, there is no number next to sulfur, so we're going to say there's 1. So if there's no numbers, so there's 1 if there is no subscripts. All right. Oxygen, look here, we have oxygen, we have 4 of these total, so we're going to have 4 oxygen. All right. So we're going to look at the next one here. We're going to have to start dealing with parentheses. So let's go ahead and read this together. The first one, if we here, we're going to change this to aluminum. So we should have aluminum, nitrogen, oxygen. So we're going to say aluminum. We're going to say nitrogen and oxygen. So those are the 3. So there's a type on this. All right. Aluminum. There is no number next to aluminum, so we're going to say that there's just 1. Okay. Nitrogen, we have 1 nitrogen, so there's no number, but we have the number outside the parentheses. So for parentheses, these are going to multiply each thing inside. So we're going to multiply by 3. So this is going to become, for nitrogen, we're going to have nitrogen is going to be 1 times the 3 on the outside. So we should get a total of 3. So 3 times 1 gives us 3 nitrogen. And then for oxygen, we have 3 here multiplied by the 3 outside. We get 9 oxygen atoms. All right, and that's just our intro to formulas. So we should be able to fill out the ones here. We're looking at these, some of these elements we don't have. So here we only have 2 elements. Here we only have 2 elements. Here we only have 2 elements. So we can get rid of these for here. So formula element 1, the first one is H. We have 2 H's. So we could say we have 2 H's. And we're going to have 1 O. So these are pretty simple. So we can go through. All of these are, we're going to be filling these in. So again, here we have no coefficients, so we have 1 Na and we have 1 C. So you can fill in these ones here. When we come to these two here, remember we're going to multiply inside by outside. All right. So last thing that we're going to do for this is writing formulas. So when we write formulas, we need to figure out the charge of our ions and write out all of these. So these are kind of our basic rules. We're going to write out the charge of both ions. We're going to circle the number of the charge. If there's no number, the charge is 1. Move the charge to become the subscript of the formula. So again, subscript are the little numbers on the bottom. And then we clean it up. Remove any reduce. So we have aluminum oxide. So if we look at aluminum oxide, we're going to look at our periodic table and find our different pieces. So what's important to note is the charges. So along here, group 1 is going to have a charge of +1. Group 2 is going to have a charge of +2. Group 13 is going to have a charge of +3, +4 or -4, -3, -2, -1, and 0. So that's one way to kind of fill in the charges of these different groups. All right, so we're going to look up the first one, aluminum oxide. So aluminum is going to be in group 3. It's going to have a charge of +3. So we're going to say aluminum, Al, is going to be 3 plus. And our oxide, so notice, oxide is oxygen. When we get our names, they change the last letters. So oxide is oxygen. So oxide is oxygen. Oxygen is going to have a charge of -2. So we end up with something like this. All right. So we wrote the charge of both ions. That's good. Next, we're going to circle the charge. So we have 3 and 2, and we're going to switch these. So this is where our crisscross comes in. The charge becomes the subscript. So for aluminum, our charge becomes the subscript. The charge 2 is going to come down. The oxygen, we're going to write oxygen again. The 3 is going to come down. And we end up getting Al2O3. So this would be our formula for aluminum oxide. There are no 1s from the formula, so it's a 2 and a 3, so that doesn't count. We reduce the subscripts when possible by dividing by the same number. We can't divide both these by 2, because this won't work. We can't divide both these by 3, because that won't work. So that's our correct answer. All right, let's look at our next example. So the next example, we have barium chloride. So again, we're going to look up our two elements, Ba for barium. Chloride is chlorine. So let's look up our elements. Barium, Ba, is going to have a charge of +2. And chlorine, Cl, is going to have a charge of -1. So we're going to have 2 plus and then 1 minus. Okay. We're going to circle our subscripts and then do our crisscross. So the way that we write this out, the Ba, the 1 is going to come down next to the Ba, and then for Cl, the 2 is going to come down next to the Cl. All right, so let's look at our rules. Here they say remove any 1s from the formula. We have a 1 here, so we're going to remove 1s. So when this goes away, we take this off. So what we end up getting is BaCl2. So this is a way to make the formulas look neater. We don't include numbers if there's just one of something. So this would be our formula for barium chloride. All right, last one, we're going to look at calcium oxide. Calcium oxide is going to have a formula of Ca and O. Oxide is oxygen. So calcium is going to have a charge of +2. Oxygen is going to have a charge of -2. So we end up with calcium, it's going to be +2. Oxygen is going to be -2. We do our crisscross method. So Ca, the 2 from here comes down here. Oxygen, the 2 from here comes down here. So this is where we reduce. Both of these can divide by 2. So we're going to reduce, we're going to divide both by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 1. 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 1. So this would end up being CaO. So we have Ca1O1. And then we can remove 1s. You don't need to go through this step, so you can skip straight to this part if you remember. But I just wanted to show you where we're getting this from. So 2's, we divide both by 2 to get 1 and 1, and then we reduce this. So CaO is going to be our formula.